The world was abuzz with news when former President Donald Trump expressed his shock at a bold move from Canada. British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, proposed imposing tolls on U.S. trucks traveling through the province to Alaska. This unexpected announcement caught many off guard, not least Trump himself, who had been pushing aggressive tariff policies against Canadian goods. The proposed tolls were seen as a direct challenge to Trump's economic strategy, a move that promised to escalate tensions between the neighboring countries. Observers noted the dramatic nature of the situation, with Trump reportedly taken aback by the swift Canadian response. The proposed tolls were not just a political maneuver, but a strategic economic counterstrike. As news spread, the implications of such a move began to sink in for various stakeholders, from government officials to business leaders and everyday citizens. The potential for a significant disruption in the flow of goods between the U.S. and Alaska loomed large. The media coverage was intense, with analysts and commentators dissecting the possible outcomes of this decision. While the tolls had not yet been implemented, their mere proposal was enough to send shockwaves through political and economic circles, highlighting the fragile nature of international trade relations in the face of protectionist policies. In a dramatic move, Trump imposed new tariffs on Canadian goods, escalating trade tensions between the two countries. The 25% tariffs targeted a wide range of products, justified by Trump as protecting American industries. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau quickly criticized the tariffs, calling them very dumb and counterproductive. The move strained relations, with Canadian officials viewing the tariffs as an existential threat. This set the stage for Canada's proposed retaliatory measures, including new tolls at the border. In light of Trump's tariffs, British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, took decisive action. The proposed tolls on U.S. trucks traveling to Alaska were part of a broader strategy to counteract the economic impact of the tariffs. Dubbed the Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act, this legislation was crafted to serve as a deterrent, a reminder that Canada would not sit idly by in the face of economic aggression. The tolls were not intended to be a permanent fixture, but rather a tool to be used if necessary. The legislation was carefully designed to allow for flexibility, giving British Columbia the ability to respond proportionately to any further escalation by the Trump administration. By introducing the tolls, Premier Eby aimed to send a clear message. Canada was prepared to defend its economic interests. The proposed tolls, while not yet implemented, were carefully calculated to target a critical route for U.S. commerce. The Alaska Highway, a vital artery for transporting goods between the lower 48 states and Alaska, was the focus of this legislative measure. By leveraging this strategic position, British Columbia hoped to bring the U.S. back to the negotiating table, thereby addressing the underlying issues of the tariffs. British Columbia's proposed tolls were just one facet of a larger Canadian response to Trump's tariffs. Across the country, provinces and the federal government were mobilizing to counteract what they saw as an unfair economic assault. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., a move aimed at hitting back where it hurt. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unveiled retaliatory tariffs on a range of American goods, further escalating the trade dispute. In Yukon, Premier Ranj Pillai introduced measures to limit American businesses' access to governmental contracts and proposed banning Alaska athletes from regional competitions. These actions reflected a growing sentiment in Canada that a strong, unified response was necessary to protect national interests. The Canadian government also directed its agencies to cease purchasing American products wherever possible, signaling a shift towards economic self-reliance. These measures were not just economic in nature, but also symbolic. They represented a collective stand against perceived American bullying, reinforcing the idea that Canada would not be intimidated. The combination of provincial and federal actions highlighted the seriousness with which Canada viewed the situation, as well as the potential for broader economic repercussions if the dispute was not resolved. In Alaska, the proposed tolls sparked real concern. Many feared for their economic well-being, especially truckers and small businesses. Higher transportation costs could mean pricier goods and strain on families. The Alaska Trucking Association warned of supply chain disruptions. The oil industry, vital to Alaska, was especially at risk. Governor Dunleavy urged U.S. and Canadian leaders to find a solution before real damage was done. While most goods entering Alaska arrive by sea or air, the role of land transport remains vital for certain products. The Alaska Highway, which runs from Dawson Creek, British Columbia to Fairbanks, Alaska, serves as a crucial link for transporting goods that require timely delivery. This route is especially important for the movement of fresh produce and other perishable items that cannot easily be shipped by sea. The proposed tolls threaten to alter this dynamic, potentially shifting the balance of how goods were transported to Alaska. If implemented, the tolls could lead to increased costs for trucking goods, prompting businesses to reconsider their logistics strategies. The resulting changes could have a ripple effect, impacting everything from pricing to the availability of certain products in Alaskan markets. Despite the prominence of sea and air transport, the potential disruption of land routes was a significant concern. For many Alaskan businesses, having multiple transportation options was crucial for maintaining flexibility and competitiveness. The prospect of tolls introduced an element of uncertainty, complicating the planning and execution of logistics operations across the region. In response to Canada's proposed tolls, some U.S. officials began discussing potential countermeasures. One notable proposal came from Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan, who suggested waiving a federal law that required foreign-registered cruise ships to stop in Canada en route to Alaska. This law, known as the Passenger Vessel Services Act, had been temporarily waived during the COVID-19 pandemic, and its suspension could bypass Canadian ports altogether. The rationale behind this proposal was to leverage the cruise ship industry as a bargaining chip. By allowing cruise ships to travel directly between Washington state and Alaska without stopping in Canada, the U.S. could potentially harm British Columbia's tourism sector, which relied heavily on cruise ship traffic. This move was seen as a way to pressure Canada into reconsidering its toll proposal. The idea of bypassing Canadian ports sparked debate, with some arguing that it could lead to further economic strain between the two countries. However, proponents believed that it could serve as an effective countermeasure, reminding Canada of the interconnected nature of the two economies. As discussions continued, the potential for a tit-for-tat escalation loomed, highlighting the need for diplomatic intervention. Amidst the political maneuvering, voices from both sides of the border called for a resolution to the growing tensions. Canadian officials, including Premier David Eby and Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma, emphasized the need for a Team Canada approach, standing firm against Trump's tariff threats while remaining open to dialogue. Eby reiterated that the toll legislation was a tool of last resort, to be used only if necessary. In Alaska, leaders like Governor Mike Dunleavy and Senator Robert Myers expressed a desire for constructive engagement with Canada. They acknowledged the legitimate concerns driving Canada's response, but stressed the importance of finding mutually beneficial solutions. The potential for economic disruption was too great to ignore, and both sides recognized the need for careful negotiation. Citizens and business owners affected by the proposed tolls echoed these sentiments, calling for pragmatic solutions that would preserve trade and economic stability. Truck drivers in particular spoke out about the potential hardships they faced, urging their governments to prioritize dialogue over confrontation. The shared interests of both nations underscored the importance of resolving the dispute through diplomacy. As the situation stood, the future of U.S.-Canada trade relations hung in the balance. The proposed tolls and retaliatory measures highlighted the fragility of the current economic landscape, raising questions about the path forward. Would the escalating tensions lead to a full-blown trade war, or could cooler heads prevail, paving the way for negotiations and compromise? Both sides acknowledged the need for dialogue, with Canadian officials open to discussions that could lead to the removal of tariffs and the withdrawal of the toll proposal. In the U.S., there was recognition of the potential consequences of a prolonged dispute, with calls for diplomatic solutions gaining traction. The interconnected nature of the two economies meant that cooperation was not just desirable, but necessary. Ultimately, the resolution of this issue would require leadership and a willingness to find common ground. As both nations grappled with the complexities of modern trade, the hope was that dialogue and negotiation would prevail over confrontation. The coming months would prove crucial in determining whether the proposed tolls and tariffs would become a reality, or if a new era of cooperation could be forged.